There's a place in America where the past never really ended. A place where razor wire surrounds 18,000 acres of farmland, where the air smells like soil, sweat, and diesel, and where men sentenced to prison spend their days picking crops under a burning Louisiana sun. This place is Angola, the largest maximum security prison in the United States, and the only one built on a former slave plantation so massive that it once had its own economy, its own culture, and its own brutal system of control. Today, more than a century later, much of that system still exists, just with new uniforms, new rules, and new names. Behind its iron gates, Angola operates like a self-contained world. Farmland, factories, ranches, workshops, disciplinary camps, lockdown cell blocks, and endless miles of open fields. But what most people never see is how the system actually works. How men arrive here, how they are assigned to field squads, how power moves through the prison, how control is enforced, not just through fences and weapons, but through routines, hierarchies, labor, and pressure. This documentary pulls back the curtain on the parts of Angola the public rarely sees. The transfer pipeline that brings inmates from county jails and state facilities into the farm. The classification process that decides who works, who locks down, and who enters the dangerous world of disciplinary camps. The daily operations that keep the prison running. Work lines, guard towers, harvesting crews, livestock work, and the old rules that never fully disappeared. What happens inside Angola isn't just punishment. It's a system, a machine, a world designed to maintain order through work, isolation, structure, and tradition, all hidden behind a rural landscape that looks peaceful from above until you step inside. This is the story of America's last plantation. This is the system Angola never wants you to see. Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now let's step inside. Most people imagine that inmates arrive at Angola because of one thing, a long prison sentence. But the reality is far more complex. Angola isn't just a prison. It's a destination, a final stop in a statewide system that funnels men based on their past, their charges, their behavior, and even the needs of the prison itself. To understand Angola, you first have to understand how someone actually gets sent there. For many inmates, the journey begins the moment they appear in a Louisiana courtroom. A judge hands down a sentence, the deputies place the cuffs back on, and the inmate is taken to a parish jail or temporary holding facility. At this point, the inmate still has no idea where they will serve their time. In Louisiana, there are multiple prisons, but only one like Angola, massive, isolated, and built to hold the most long-term and high-risk inmates. So while some prisoners end up in smaller state prisons, others are processed differently. Their paperwork gets flagged. Their classification forms get marked with certain codes. And these small details determine whether the road leads them to a regular state facility or straight to Angola. The first major step is the classification screening, a structured review performed by the Department of Public Safety and Corrections. This is not a quick meeting. It's a long evaluation that studies multiple layers of an inmate's background. Officers look at the length of the sentence, the type of crime, the inmate's age, their physical health, mental health, previous institutional behavior, and even details from past arrests. Everything matters. A long sentence, even if the inmate has never been to prison before, almost always puts Angola on the table. Someone serving 30 years, 50 years, or life is unlikely to be assigned to a smaller facility with limited security. Angola was built for those cases. What surprises many people is that Angola doesn't only receive violent offenders. While a large majority of men inside the farm are serving time for serious crimes, classification isn't based solely on offense. The system also looks at behavioral risk, escape attempts, gang involvement, history of institutional violence, or a high need for supervision. Even a previous fight in a holding jail can affect the decision. If the system believes an inmate needs the kind of tight structure Angola provides, their path becomes clearer. Angola has the resources, land, and staffing to manage individuals who require strict control. But not every Angola transfer is because of risk. Some inmates are sent there because the prison is designed to house extremely long-term sentences. Smaller facilities cannot hold lifers indefinitely, especially when the prison population rotates frequently. Angola, with its massive size, can. It is a place where men may spend decades, growing old behind its gates, living out long sentences in a system designed to handle that reality. For the state, Angola is not just a prison, it is a long-term storage unit. A final destination. Once classification is complete, the inmate's paperwork joins a stack of transport files. Each one contains the inmate's charges, sentence, evaluations, medical concerns, and housing recommendations. From here, the next stage begins, the transfer order. This document officially assigns the inmate to Angola and places their name on the next available transport list. At this point, the decision is final. Angola becomes their new home, whether temporary or permanent. The transfer itself is not simple. Louisiana correctional transports are planned carefully, and the vehicles used for Angola runs are equipped for long distances and unpredictable terrain. Angola sits in rural West Feliciana Parish, far from major highways, and surrounded by forest and farmland. To get there, buses travel long, narrow roads, escorted by trained officers who understand the risks. Every trip is treated seriously because many of the inmates on these buses are serving heavy sentences. There is no such thing as a routine Angola transfer. Inside the bus, inmates sit in assigned restraints, often handcuffed and secured to anchors depending on classification level. The air is usually tense. Some men know they are going to Angola for the first time. Others are returning after being moved around the system. Silence is common. Everyone knows what Angola represents: size, work, structure, and a daily routine that leaves little room for anything else. Veteran inmates sometimes tell stories quietly. Stories about field squads, long days under the sun, harsh discipline, or the difficulty of adjusting. But most sit quietly, waiting, unsure of what to expect. As the bus approaches the gates, the landscape changes. The outside world disappears. Tall towers rise in the distance. The farmland stretches so wide it blends into the horizon. Most prisons feel like a closed box. Angola feels like a country inside a country. The inmate sees tractors, fields, cattle herds, and endless stretches of land marked by fences and guard posts. Nothing about it resembles a typical correctional facility. Once the bus stops at the reception center, the inmate enters the intake process, one of the most structured systems in Louisiana corrections. Officers search property, verify identity, check sentence paperwork, photograph the inmate again, and create updated digital records. Medical staff screen for injuries or illnesses. Mental health staff conduct short evaluations. Officers review classification again to decide housing, whether the inmate goes to general population, a working camp, the closed cell blocks, or a transitional unit. For many new arrivals, the moment they walk into Angola's intake building is overwhelming. The noise, the size, the strict routines, the constant movement of officers and inmates. The realization sets in quickly: this prison is not temporary. The system here is deeper, older, and far more controlled than anything they've seen before. All of these steps, courtroom, jail, classification, paperwork, transfer order, transport, and intake, make up the pipeline into Angola. A pipeline shaped by risk, sentence length, and institutional needs. A pipeline that feeds the largest prison farm in America with a constant flow of new arrivals. And once someone enters this world, their life begins to move according to Angola's rules, Angola's routines, and Angola's historical power structure. The farm becomes their universe, and surviving it becomes their next challenge. Most prisons in America process new inmates in a predictable way: identification, medical checks, clothing issue, housing assignment. Angola does these things too, but the scale, the speed, and the psychological weight of the process feel different. Angola is a world with its own history, its own culture, and its own strict routines, and before a man becomes part of that world, the system must strip away everything familiar and reshape him into someone who can function inside this massive prison farm. The moment a new inmate steps off the transfer bus, he enters a place designed to make one thing clear: Angola does not adjust to you. You adjust to Angola. Officers guide the men into the intake building, a large, echoing space where the sound of movement, orders, footsteps, metal doors, distant radios, creates its own rhythm. The rules come fast, and there is no misunderstanding them. Stand here. Move there. Face forward. Keep your hands visible. Do not speak unless spoken to. The structure begins immediately. The intake process starts with the identification check, where officers verify that the inmate delivered is the inmate ordered. Wristbands, paperwork, fingerprints, and digital files are cross-checked carefully. Angola houses long-term and high-risk inmates, so any error, misidentification, missing medical notes, incomplete sentencing documents, must be corrected before the inmate enters the system. Nothing moves forward until the paperwork is flawless. From there, inmates pass through the search and property review, where every personal item brought from the parish jail is logged, inspected, or discarded. Shoes, letters, hygiene items, legal papers, everything is spread out, checked, and sorted. Most personal property is taken away temporarily so staff can control exactly what enters the institution. This moment hits many men hard because it symbolizes the shift from temporary incarceration to long-term confinement. Whatever they held on to before, small comforts, familiar items, is now out of their hands. Next comes the medical and mental health evaluation, one of the most important stages in the Angola intake process. Doctors and nurses check vital signs, injuries, disabilities, chronic illnesses, and medication needs. Blood pressure, blood samples, past surgeries, mobility issues. Every detail goes into the inmate's long-term medical plan. Angola is enormous, and the distance between units can be challenging, so understanding whether an inmate can perform field labor, needs a low-impact job, or requires restricted movement is crucial. Mental health staff conduct short but focused assessments. They are not long therapy sessions. These evaluations are designed to identify risk, suicidal thoughts, severe mental illnesses, psychotic episodes, or conditions needing immediate care. Angola houses men who may spend decades inside, so catching these issues early is part of the system's survival strategy. After medical clearance, inmates move to photographing and digital identification. Pictures are taken from multiple angles for internal records. Inmates often describe this moment as the point where they realize Angola is creating a file that will follow them for years, sometimes for the rest of their lives. The system now has a new number, a new image, a new subject. Identity becomes paperwork. Then comes one of the most defining steps, classification inside Angola itself. While the state's classification determines that an inmate must be sent to Angola, the prison's internal classification decides where they will live and how they will work. Officers and administrators review the inmate's background, sentence length, disciplinary history, gang affiliations, escape risk, age, physical condition, and mental health recommendations. Angola has multiple housing styles: open dormitories, closed cell blocks, transitional units, working camps, and disciplinary camps. The decision made in this room will shape an inmate's daily life completely. For many, arriving at Angola means being assigned to a working camp, where field labor is part of the daily routine. Younger, physically fit inmates with low medical restrictions are often placed in field squads. Older inmates or those with medical limitations may be assigned to indoor jobs, kitchen, laundry, maintenance, janitorial work. High-risk inmates may go to Camp J or the closed cell restricted units. Almost everyone begins in some form of transitional housing before reaching their long-term unit. Once classification is set, the inmate reaches the stage that leaves a lasting impression: the issue of Angola clothing. The bright prison uniforms, marked differently depending on status, replace everything the inmate wore before. At this moment, the inmate's connection to the outside world fades further. Clothing becomes symbolic. Everyone looks the same, moves the same, and follows the same rules. When the uniforms are issued, inmates walk through a line where they receive basic hygiene supplies, bedding, and assigned objects like an identification badge. Officers explain simple rules: keep your badge visible, keep your bunk made, follow movement schedules, report to work on time, and follow all orders from security staff. Nothing about the system encourages individuality. Angola runs smoothly because every person follows a predictable pattern. Then comes the part most inmates never forget: orientation. This isn't a friendly welcome session. It is a clear, structured explanation of how life works inside America's largest prison farm. Inmates are told about the daily schedule, the consequences for disobedience, the rules governing movement, the expectations for work, and the disciplinary system. They learn about security zones, quiet hours, job assignments, medical request procedures, and housing behavior standards. Officers talk through specific rules that only exist in large farming prisons: how to line up for field squads, how to respond to mounted officers, how to behave during work calls, and how to avoid penalties that can move an inmate to a harsher camp. During orientation, new arrivals also learn something else. Angola's rhythm never stops. Work hours start early. Movement is monitored. Officers observe everything. The prison may look open from the outside, with its miles of fields and open space, but freedom does not exist here. The fields are controlled, the fences are endless, and the towers watch constantly. Once intake and orientation end, inmates are escorted to their assigned housing unit. For many, that first walk through Angola is overwhelming. They see the size of the place, the long roads, the vast farmland, the security posts, the horses, the tractors, and the endless acres of fenced territory. They see older inmates moving slowly along walkways, young inmates pushing carts of supplies, field lines marching in formation. Everywhere they look, the system is in motion. And somewhere in that movement, each new inmate realizes this truth. Angola is not a prison you simply enter. It is a prison that absorbs you. For some, this becomes motivation to work quietly and avoid trouble. For others, it becomes a daily struggle for survival. But for everyone, intake marks the beginning of a routine that will define their world. Once a new inmate completes intake, Angola places him into one of its many housing camps, and this is where the true rhythm of the prison begins. Each camp operates like its own small town with its own routines, personalities, unwritten rules, and power structures. And because Angola is so large, spreading across 18,000 acres, moving from one camp to another can feel like traveling between different worlds within the same prison. For most inmates, the first stop is a transitional camp, where they stay until a long-term housing assignment is confirmed. Transitional units are loud, crowded, and constantly in motion. Men who just arrived try to understand the rules while older inmates watch them closely. Angola has a unique culture, and everyone entering the system learns quickly that this place runs on a combination of strict officer authority and powerful inmate hierarchy. The official rules come from the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections, but the unwritten rules come from decades of prison tradition. When an inmate is finally assigned to a permanent camp, Camp C, Camp D, Camp F, Camp J, or one of the other residential units, life becomes structured around routines. Every morning begins the same way: lights on, roll call, count, movement to breakfast, and preparation for work squads. Officers shout orders, radios crackle across the yard, and inmates line up in long rows, waiting to be cleared for movement. Even the sound of Angola mornings becomes familiar: the combination of boots, gates, metal keys, horses moving toward field lines, and distant tractors starting up for the day. Inside the housing units, the rules are posted clearly. Keep your bunk area clean. Follow the movement schedule. Respect count times. No contraband. No fighting. No loud disturbances. Failure to follow any of these rules can lead to disciplinary write-ups, loss of privileges, or a transfer to a harsher camp. Most inmates understand quickly that surviving Angola is not about being tough. It's about staying out of unnecessary trouble. But while the official rules are straightforward, the unofficial inmate hierarchy is more complicated. Angola houses men serving long sentences, decades, life terms, and multi-life terms, and this creates a population of individuals who have lived inside the prison for 10, 20, or even 40 years. These long-term inmates often hold influence in the dorms. They teach new arrivals how to avoid conflicts, how to navigate work assignments, and how to manage relationships with officers. Angola's size and structure mean that inexperienced inmates rarely do well unless they understand the internal culture. This hierarchy does not operate like a movie version of prison gangs. Angola's unwritten system is built more on seniority, routine, and discipline than on flashy violence. Older inmates set the tone in many dorms. They enforce cleanliness, prevent chaos, and maintain order through strong social pressure. In a place as large as Angola, chaos benefits no one, and long-term residents understand that stability protects everyone. New inmates often learn quickly, speak respectfully, avoid drama, do your job, and understand your surroundings. Angola rewards routine and punishes disruption. But beyond dorm rules, the biggest part of camp life is work. Each camp is connected to specific job assignments: field squads, farm operations, kitchens, laundry units, maintenance crews, welding shops, janitorial routes, and more. Field squads are the most well-known part of Angola's daily structure. Men assigned to field work wake up early, line up in formation, and march under the supervision of mounted officers. These squads harvest crops, clear land, pull weeds, plant seeds, and maintain the endless fields surrounding the prison. Work is mandatory for most able-bodied inmates, and refusal can result in disciplinary action. Inmates in indoor jobs have a slightly different routine. Kitchen workers start before sunrise, preparing massive amounts of food for the camps. Laundry workers wash thousands of uniforms and bedding. Maintenance workers repair broken equipment across the prison. Each job has its own demands, and each job shapes how inmates move through the day. Angola functions like a small city, and every inmate assigned to a job becomes part of the engine that keeps it running. Camps also operate with structured movement. Inmates cannot walk freely between areas. They must move during scheduled times, under supervision, and along designated paths. Housing zones, recreational yards, dining halls, and work sites are all controlled by officers who track movement constantly. Even recreation is organized. Inmates are allowed time in the yard, the gym, or the hobby shops depending on their classification and behavior. Some inmates spend decades inside Angola without causing trouble because they learn how to live within the system's narrow lanes. But camp life also has a psychological dimension. The isolation of Angola, miles from cities, surrounded by rural land, creates a sense of separation from the outside world. Many inmates describe it as living inside a bubble where time moves differently. Some days feel endless, especially for those who work long hours in the fields. Others slip by quietly for inmates who keep to themselves. Angola's size can make a person feel small, and its routines can make days blend together until one year feels just like the last. Another critical part of camp life is discipline. If an inmate breaks a major rule, the prison may move him to a more restrictive camp. Camp J, historically known for strict disciplinary housing, housed inmates who received frequent write-ups, refused work, or posed security risks. Restrictions there were tougher, reduced movement, fewer privileges, and tighter control. Even today, disciplinary units inside Angola operate with stricter routines and more isolation. Most inmates do everything they can to avoid being sent there. Medical needs also shape camp life. Angola has its own hospital unit, dental department, mental health area, and long-term care facility. Older inmates, some in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, move through the system slowly, often supported by medical staff. Angola's population includes many aging men who have lived there for decades, which creates another layer of community inside the camps. Groups of older inmates sharing stories of past eras and helping younger ones adapt. Despite the heavy routines, some inmates build meaningful relationships within their dorms. They form study groups, religious groups, sports teams, or arts programs. Angola even has its own rodeo events, hobby crafts, and educational courses. These programs give inmates structure beyond work, though access depends on behavior, classification, and space availability. Yet no matter how much Angola offers, the system remains the center of everything. Rules do not bend. Movement does not change. Officers expect obedience. Work remains mandatory, and the hierarchy within the dorms reinforces the stability needed to control a population this large. Life in the camps teaches one core lesson. Angola does not run on fences alone. It runs on order, routine, and a powerful internal culture shaped by decades of history. And for every inmate inside, survival begins with understanding that culture, long before the fields, long before the disciplinary camps, long before the years start to pass. For many inmates inside Angola, the daily reality of prison life is defined not by the dorms, not by the rules, and not even by the officers, but by the fields. The fields are the center of Angola's identity. They are its history, its labor engine, and the reason the prison operates the way it does. Every morning, as the sun rises over West Feliciana Parish, hundreds of inmates line up to begin the long walk toward the farmland that stretches farther than the eye can see. This routine has existed for generations, and for many inmates, it becomes the rhythm of life. The fields operate on a strict schedule. Before dawn, officers move through the camps calling for field line formation. Inmates assigned to field squads step out of their dorms, form rows, and stand silently while supervisors check each man's identification and classification. The air is often cool, the sky still dark, and the sound of boots on pavement echoes across the prison grounds. Even before the workday begins, the structure is unmistakable. Angola runs on discipline, and the fields are where that discipline becomes visible. Leading each squad are mounted officers, correctional staff on horseback, who oversee the work. The image is striking: officers on horses, inmates in long lines, the open fields in front of them. It is one of the most recognizable parts of Angola's daily routine. The mounted officers watch for safety, order, and compliance, guiding the squads toward the areas scheduled for work that day. Behind them, inmates march in formation, carrying tools like hoes, cutters, or other farm equipment. Once the squads reach the fields, the work begins immediately. Angola's land is divided into sections for crops such as corn, soybeans, cotton, vegetables, and large grazing areas for cattle. Depending on the season, inmates might plant seeds, chop weeds, harvest crops, clear brush, or maintain the soil. During the harvest months, the workload increases as crews move row by row across the massive acreage. Angola is one of the only prisons of its size still operating a huge agricultural system, and field labor is essential to keeping that system running. Work in the fields is physically demanding, especially under Louisiana's intense heat. In the summer, temperatures can climb above 100 degrees. Inmates work for long hours under the sun, pausing only for scheduled water breaks or when officers call for rest. Some inmates adapt quickly, focusing on staying quiet, keeping pace, and avoiding any form of misconduct. Others struggle, especially those who are older, new to field work, or medically fragile. Angola evaluates inmates for medical ability during intake, but even then, field labor can be challenging for anyone who has never worked in agriculture. Many inmates describe the fields as a place where time moves differently. The repetitive motion of chopping weeds, the long rows stretching endlessly in front of them, the sound of insects and wind moving through the crops. These moments can feel slow, heavy, and consuming. Some men say they pass the time by counting rows, mentally breaking the day into small goals. Others simply focus on pace, following the rhythm of the squad. The mounted officers keep the formation steady, ensuring no one lags behind or disrupts the work pattern. For inmates who adapt, the fields become part of a routine that eventually feels predictable. They wake, work, return to camp, shower, eat, rest, and prepare to repeat the cycle the next day. For inmates who struggle, however, the fields become a daily test, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Angola's disciplinary system allows inmates to request different job assignments, but many remain in field squads until they earn trust or show consistent reliability. Not all inmates work in the fields. Some are assigned to indoor agricultural jobs like greenhouse maintenance, crop sorting, or livestock operations. Angola has one of the largest prison ranches in the country, raising cattle that roam across portions of the land. These agricultural programs also rely on inmate labor, but the work differs from field squads, less physically intense, more skill-based, and more dependent on animal care or indoor handling tasks. Still, the fields hold the strongest influence on Angola's identity. They represent a way of life that has existed for over a century, when the land transitioned from a slave plantation into a prison farm. Today, Angola's operations have modernized, but the structure, large-scale agriculture sustained by inmate labor, remains part of its core system. The continuity between past and present is not lost on the inmates. Many talk about the weight of history they feel when working in the fields, understanding the significance of the land beneath their feet. Field squads also serve a deeper purpose inside Angola's management strategy. Work keeps the population structured. It provides routine, reduces idle time, and creates predictable behavior patterns. Angola is too large, too spread out, and too populated to leave thousands of men unoccupied. The fields are not just labor, they are a control mechanism. They keep order. But field work also forges a unique form of communication inside the inmate population. Men from different camps, different backgrounds, and different sentences come together in the same lines. Conversations are minimal during work, but during rest breaks, inmates share advice, stories, and strategies for surviving Angola's intense routines. Older inmates often tell younger ones how to pace themselves, how to avoid unnecessary disciplinary issues, and how to stay mentally grounded inside a system that never stops moving. At the end of each workday, squads line up again and march back to their camps under the supervision of mounted officers. The return is quieter, slower, and more reflective. Inmates are tired. Some think about food. Some think about sleep. Others think about how many decades lie ahead of them, each day punctuated by the same routine. But even as the day ends, the fields remain symbolic of one central truth. Angola is built on work, and work shapes the lives of the men inside. The fields are not just land, they are the heartbeat of the prison. And as long as Angola stands, the fields will continue to define what daily life looks like for thousands of inmates. By the time an inmate reaches his final chapters inside Angola, whether months or decades into his sentence, he has learned one truth that shapes every decision he makes. This prison runs on control. Control through routine. Control through work. Control through classification. Control through consequences. Angola's size and power come from a system designed to manage thousands of men across vast land and multiple camps, and understanding that system becomes the only way an inmate can survive without constant conflict. Every inmate eventually encounters the deeper layers of Angola's structure, layers that are less visible to the outside world but define the prison's internal reality. One of these layers is disciplinary control, a system built to correct behavior, maintain order, and re-establish structure when rules are broken. When an inmate receives a disciplinary write-up, whether for refusing work, fighting, possessing contraband, or disobeying orders, his entire status inside Angola can shift immediately. The first step in this process is the disciplinary board, a formal hearing where officers review the incident, interview the inmate, examine evidence, and decide the level of punishment. Penalties can range from loss of privileges to temporary isolation to transfer into a more restrictive camp. For many inmates, the possibility of being sent to a high-security or disciplinary unit becomes a constant reminder of how fragile stability can be inside Angola. These disciplinary units operate with a much stricter environment. Movement is limited. Privileges decrease. The days become longer, the isolation heavier, the routines more rigid. Inmates in these units follow tighter schedules, spend more time confined, and experience fewer opportunities for programs or outdoor activity. Angola's disciplinary system isn't simply about punishment. It's about reinforcing the structure that keeps the entire prison running smoothly. But not every inmate ends up in disciplinary housing. Many men spend years, even decades, working steadily, avoiding conflict, and maintaining good behavior. These inmates follow an unwritten strategy. Blend into the system without losing yourself to it. They learn which officers enforce rules strictly and which communicate clearly. They learn when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to ask for help, and when to let situations pass. In a prison as large as Angola, survival often depends not on strength, but on understanding people, timing, and routine. Programs also play a significant role in inmate survival. Angola offers education classes, vocational training, chapel programs, hobby workshops, and even the well-known Angola rodeo events. For some men, these programs provide structure beyond work and discipline. They give inmates goals to pursue, skills to learn, and ways to stay mentally grounded. An inmate attending carpentry classes, vocational welding, or religious meetings often finds a sense of purpose that the fields alone cannot provide. Long-term inmates, in particular, often build routines that help them manage the emotional weight of long sentences. Some focus on religion, becoming deeply involved in chapel programs. Others commit themselves to education, earning certifications, or teaching other inmates. Still others pour their time into hobby crafts, leatherwork, jewelry, wood carving, small acts of creativity in an environment defined by structure and routine. These routines become lifelines, helping men anchor themselves in a place where days can blend together endlessly. Medical care also shapes the final stage of many inmates lives inside Angola. Because the prison houses one of the largest populations of aging inmates in the United States, its medical center resembles a long-term care facility. Men in their 60s, 70s, and 80s move slowly across the yards or rely on medical staff for daily assistance. Some inmates never leave Angola. They grow old within its gates, spending their final years in a system that began when they were young. For these men, Angola becomes not only a prison, but the place they live, age, and eventually pass away. The emotional landscape of Angola is complicated. For some inmates, the structure provides stability after years of chaos or instability in the outside world. For others, the endless repetition of daily routines becomes mentally exhausting. Inmates often form supportive relationships within their dorms, friendships that make the passing years feel less heavy. But the system always remains in the background, shaping every moment of daily life. Even small decisions, like asking for a new job assignment, reporting a medical issue, or requesting a transfer to another camp, require navigating Angola's bureaucratic layers. In a prison this large, nothing moves quickly. Patience becomes a skill. Discipline becomes a survival tool. Understanding the flow of paperwork, the hierarchy of officers, and the rhythm of camp life becomes essential. Yet, despite all these layers of control, there is also a quiet, steady determination that runs through the inmate population. Many men hold on to hope through routine, faith, education, or personal growth. They write letters to family, work to maintain relationships, or build new ones inside the prison. They think about parole hearings, legal appeals, or simply the next day of work. Even men serving life sentences often find purpose, mentoring younger inmates, participating in programs, or contributing to camp routines. As years pass, the structure of Angola becomes familiar. The fields become predictable. The camps become known. The faces of officers and inmates become part of a landscape that rarely changes. For some inmates, this familiarity brings comfort. For others, it brings a sense of being trapped in a world that never stops moving around them. But whether an inmate adapts fully or continues struggling, one truth remains. Angola is a system, massive, structured, and deeply rooted in history. And surviving it requires understanding the balance between control, routine, and personal resilience. By the time an inmate reaches the late stages of his sentence or settles into his long-term life inside the prison, he has become part of that system. Not because he chose to, but because Angola forces every man to find a place within its operations. And for thousands of inmates, that search for balance, between maintaining identity and surviving a world built on discipline, becomes the central challenge of life inside America's largest prison farm. Angola is more than a prison. It is a world built from history, shaped by routine, and held together by a system that demands discipline from everyone inside its gates. From the moment an inmate enters through intake, to the long days in the camps, to the endless work in the fields, to the daily challenge of living within a strict hierarchy, Angola becomes a place where survival depends on understanding the rules long before questioning them. This documentary has shown the parts the public rarely sees. The pipeline that brings men here. The intake process that reshapes identity. The camp life that sets order. The field labor that drives the entire operation. And the constant struggle to maintain control in a system designed to run like a machine. For thousands of men, Angola is not a chapter of their life. It is their entire world. A place where years pass quietly under the Louisiana sun, where routines become habits, and where the battle to hold on to hope continues day after day. And that is the reality of America's last plantation. A prison where history still echoes, where the land itself tells a story, and where every man inside must learn how to navigate the powerful system surrounding him. Thank you for watching this deep look inside Angola. If you want more real, factual stories from America's hidden prison systems, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps this channel keep exposing the places where the system hides its deepest stories. Stay tuned for the next documentary.